This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed psychotherapist and soul-led leadership coach to high-achieving and highly sensitive professional women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 154. Hey, if you're liking what you're hearing, I really encourage you to go out to Apple Podcast and leave either a star rating, it's just a simple little click on the number of stars, or you can actually write a review. This really does help the algorithms and things like that from this podcast to be discovered more easily by other women around the world. So appreciate you listening. And now on my website, if you go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com and over on the podcast tab, if you click that, there's a little place where you can actually leave me a little audio message. So again, I'm the one that still checks all those things. You can actually leave me a message like what you like, what topics you want to continue to hear on the podcast, and so much more. Thank you so much for listening, and here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about this upcoming guest. Today, I have Bonnie Hagman, and she is a renowned expert in visionary leadership and workforce trends. She is the CEO of EDA Inc., premium human capital brand with a powerful culture tech platform that is designed to make culture visible and executive development services, including executive and high potential development, succession planning, C-suite coaching, board evaluations, and creating compelling cultures that last. She's a published author of 3 books and is often called on for leadership strategy by organizations and as a subject matter expert for the media, including MarketWatch, Fast Company, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, and many more. She is a gender equality advocate, a member of the Business Council for Global Illuminator, Exponent.org, and co-founder and co-chair of Women Execs on Boards. Cannot wait to have this conversation with Bonnie. And the book that I have gone over and read and what Bonnie and I are going to discuss today is called The Courage to Advance, Real-Life Resilience from the World's Most Successful Women in Business. So Bonnie, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, share just a little bit, like what made you and Lisa want to actually put this book together, which is a collaboration of a lot of different women's stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what happened was in 2016, I went through this program. It was called Women on Board, Succeeding as a Corporate Director at the Harvard Business School. Mm-hmm. And it was the inaugural program for women on boards at Harvard. And, when I went, there were like 63 women from 17 countries in that class.
Okay.
And Lisa was one of them. And we came out of that with, Harvard's great at the education, but they don't really have that next piece, like what's next after you leave. Mm-hmm. And so we were trying to continue to educate ourselves and continue to kind of keep some of the women together through a series of phone calls, which Lisa initiated. And then I started helping her when she couldn't be there. Mm-hmm. So after about a year and a half, another group had gone through, and they were even bigger class. And we just had all of them coming to these calls or inviting them. Mm-hmm. And one day I sat down and I made a database of all the women in these 2 classes. So now there's like 140 of us. And these are really, high level women. Like there were CEOs of publicly traded companies. And like even in my small group when I was there was a woman, like the woman over women's equality at UNESCO, mm-hmm. a cable CEO of a public company, mm-hmm. One of the most powerful women in Saudi. I mean, like on and on. Like these people are amazing.
Right.
So I did this database because I travel a lot and most of us travel. And I thought, it'd be great if when we go to different cities, we just could have lunches together and things like that. So we'd get to know each other and help each other. But when I finished doing this database, which took me about 2 hours probably,
Mm-hmm.
I just sat back and I thought, if this group organized, that would be really powerful.
Uh-huh.
And so I went to Lisa. We had lunch in New York. And I said, what do you think about creating a formal network? And she liked it. And so we co-founded this network, which now, even since I sent you the info, now is over 200 members.
Oh, wow.
And from 23 countries. And we're just very diverse, very high level, board ready women. And what we created was this culture of really helping each other. So one of the things, we tell people when they're thinking about joining, they have to have gone through these programs at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
And if they come, we say, this is what we're all about. We're all about being 100% committed to each other's success,
Mm-hmm.
which means we're going to roll out our Rolodexes. We're going to try to help each other get on boards and then try to bring up other women behind us. Like our goal is to leave the ladder down.
Yes.
And not just leave it down, but reach down.
Yeah.
And so the book came out of our collaboration, first to build the network, and then later, this is my third book. So I pitched this idea to my publisher. I said, I'd like to tell their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so they thought that was a good idea, which is an interesting story by itself because this whole pitch got lost during the COVID time.
Oh, no.
So I thought they turned it down. So I finally reached out and said, hey, I guess you're going to pass on this. Do you mind if I take it to another publisher? And they came back and said, oh, sorry, we were furloughed. We're back. We want to do it. So anyway, so we did get the book published and we ended up, we wrote a lot more stories than are in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who didn't get it in the book, and that was a publisher's choice, we decided to we had created a podcast ourselves, and so we have all these stories available, and it's been quite an adventure. And hearing their stories ourselves, and then being able to tell them it's moving and inspirational for us too.
Well, yeah. So ladies, just so you know, the book is organized. I'm at the very beginning of it. It says, the leadership themes that they focus on are courage, resiliency, adaptability, sense making, and vulnerability. And these are all the areas that we talk about, or I talk about on the podcast. And so I loved, again, there's so much misconception, I think, about leadership and what it is and what it isn't. And then when you put women in leadership, again, I like how you say, like, we're leaving the ladder down and we're reaching down and pulling up as well. And it's not like going against one another. It's how do we really support one another and our diversities and the skills that we have so that we can continue to amplify our voices and move forward. So I love that you guys, if you couldn't fit them into the book due to the publisher saying, yeah, we got to keep it shorter, you were able to share them in other places.
Definitely. I mean, there's so many stories to tell. And here's what we decided to do. And this actually came out of one of my staff members, because, my staff helped a lot to organize the book and the interviews and all of that for EDA. And so one of the staff members said, when we do the book guide, because it's being used in quite a few book clubs, then what if we put at the end, we want to hear your story. And so we did that. So we put it in the book guide at the end. The book guides are free for anyone who wants to have a book club. And we will, if you will send us you can upload your story to us. And then we would love to hear your story as well. And, we'd love to see if there's something we could do with that down the road.
Love it. Well, and again, it's the celebration of incredible, powerful women who have moved through, overcome, done so many things in their career. It's just absolutely amazing. And I am curious, would you mind sharing a little bit of your own story, which I know is in the book itself, but would you mind sharing it with my listeners?
I don't mind at all. So what, everybody, I asked the question in each of the interviews, tell us about the highest level you've achieved, some of the hardest things you've been through on the path, and how did you get through them? And so, for me, what I think for high level achievement, what I've done is really gone from thinking I was going to teach literature at a university and starting out that pathway as a high school English teacher, which I did for 3 years. And, to swiftly deciding that was not the path for me and moving into corporate.
Mm-hmm.
So I got over into corporate, and then I did some management, and then I was recruited by a company in California, which changed my trajectory in a very positive way. And that was CPP, the publisher of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked for them for 5 years. And then I started running human capital firms in 2001. We grew it. And I'm one of those people I'm very curious. I'm very interested in development for myself and others. And so after about 6 or 7 years, I needed to grow. And so we did an acquisition. That's how we got EDA, which has been in business actually since 1982. And then a few years later, we decided to start building technology in 2012, and we're getting ready. We've rolled out several iterations I would call it a lab test environment.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're almost ready to take our first big tech product to market.
Sweet.
So we're very excited about that. So those are sort of high level achievements, and just being able to write and speak and all that stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
But the hard thing, which is probably the more interesting piece, is I'm a workaholic. And so
we talk a little bit about that when it comes to perfectionism and workaholic. On the show.
Yes. So mine actually is pretty rooted in my background, which is I grew up on a farm in Western Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big farm, 2,000 acres. And we were not a big family. There were 4 of us. And so, we had hands and all that, but we were sun up to sundown working. And if you weren't working, you were considered lazy.
Yep.
And so that's very ingrained in me. And I have a hard time relaxing.
Yep.
And so during this acquisition time period, so we grow from 2001 to 2006, my company, Human Capital Firm, is growing, doing well. We decide to do an acquisition and personally fund most of it.
Wow.
And, I used my IRA money, and, we were not wealthy. And so we were pulling from everywhere. And then 2008 comes along. So we've just done an acquisition and are in debt and still integrating, still trying to figure it all out. And then 2008 comes along, and us, along with every other human capital firm I know, lost 70% of our business.
Oof.
So, it was by far the hardest thing that I've been through in my career, which was I worked 3 years without a paycheck, with 3 days off.
Oh my gosh.
And most of those days were beyond 10 hours a day. And so what happened after a while was I couldn't get myself out of the pattern of working like that. Like, it's almost self-perpetuating somehow.
Yep. It's like the train kept going and it kept going faster and faster. And you're like, I can't seem to stop it. Yep.
I couldn't stop it. I could not figure out how to fix it. And so my body decided it had had enough and crashed on me. And so what happened was I ended up getting sick. I don't even know what it was. Couldn't tell you today. Couldn't tell you back then. But I got sick and ended up I was in bed and couldn't even watch TV.
It's probably adrenal fatigue to the finest.
That sounds right.
Yep. Yeah.
I could not even turn the TV on. And didn't want to, didn't have the energy to watch it. And so I'm in bed, I've got this full plate and I can't get out of bed. And so my business partner, she was in the business, and she, I'm trying to think, was she part-time or full-time at that time? I can't really remember, but she drove to Kansas City from Oklahoma City. And she came in, just helped some with my healthcare needs. And then she sat down beside me by the bed with a notepad, and she said, "Tell me everything you have on your plate." Wow. And I told her everything. And she said, "I'm taking it." And she said, "You get better. We need you."
Yeah.
And she took everything off my plate.
Wow.
And she did that for it took several weeks for me to even be able to function normally.
Mm-hmm.
So but it helped me, that was how I was able to reset and try to
Yeah.
get out of that. And if I hadn't got sick, I don't know what would happen. But
Eventually the body does give out when you're running
yeah.
like that or just going as hard as you were. And I know you talk about it in the book too, like that's burnout. It's like, oh yeah, to the nth degree when it
Yes,
wipes you
and
out.
I did burn out. And burnout for me. Now, being into human capital business, I've seen burnout a few times. And when I've seen it before, I've never seen anyone recover. Not really recover. Like, and I'm talking the severe burnout where it becomes like almost a breakdown.
Yeah.
So I was afraid I would never recover. And so for me, what it felt like was someone unplugged the lights.
Yep.
My heart was not in it. There was no spark.
Yeah.
So I would get up every day and go to the computer to work. And I had to make myself do it. And I had no joy and I couldn't wait for it to be over.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think it would come back. But after I balanced myself, started taking a paycheck again and started working through the debt, we did not file bankruptcy. We worked through every dime we owed.
Wow.
And we were completely debt free 1 month before COVID hit. But we had done that. But I will tell you, there came a day that the lights plugged back in, and I'm extremely passionate again, and excited about now I've added this gender advocacy to what I'm doing, and I love it, and I'm excited about my future and what I'm doing. But it was a horrible experience to go through.
Well, absolutely. And again, so many of the stories, not all of them are the same in that regard, but it's like there's, some big things in life that can knock you to the ground. How did you then make sure you didn't get back on that workaholic train? Like you didn't just burn yourself out again? What sort of things did you do to make sure you were managing that differently this time around?
Well, it's a constant battle. I have to tell you, the second time Annette, my business partner, has basically saved my life was 2 summers ago, where I had gotten sort of back in there and my blood pressure was really high. And I ended up in the ER twice on vacation, and she and her daughter were with us. And, if she were not there, I don't know what I would have done. First of all, it would have been horrible for my kids. But it was just it was bad.
Yeah.
And so that, I fight it. I still fight it. But here's one of the things I do try to do is I remember that, and now I'm not Jewish, but I remember hearing about the Sabbath, right? Like they do Friday night to Saturday night, like sundown to sundown. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to try that.
Yep.
So I started like saying, okay, sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night. I will take that 24 hours and at least I'll have that. So then what I found is when I do that, I'm usually getting into the relaxation mode by the time Saturday night gets here.
Yep.
And I don't go back into it like I would.
Beautiful.
So that's one. And then the other is I now have a significant other, my boyfriend in Utah. And so I do my heavy lifting when I'm not with him. And then I try to just take a break and, go hiking and stuff when we were together.
Yeah. So again, like truly be present with him when you guys are there. It's like, this is the moment there, because again, we're never ever guaranteed that will ever happen again.
That's
so
right.
It's being in the moment of being grateful. Like, I'm so glad that we're together and we have this opportunity to share together. And yeah, it's like work is beautiful and you're doing some incredible things, but it does have a cost if there's not more of a harmony in it.
And I do have 9 acres of my own. And so the 9 acres are my little farm.
Yep.
Not that I have farming stuff here, although I am a beekeeper.
Oh, cool.
But getting outside is a lot of therapy for me.
Yeah. Yep. It's talked
So that
about,
helps.
especially, yeah, and on this show, we talk so much about self-care, and especially for those that are more highly sensitive or the empaths, that it's like nature is a huge balm to calm the nervous
Mm-hmm.
system. And research has
Mm-hmm.
shown over and over for majority of people, majority of humans, being out and us reconnecting to that primal, like putting your feet on the dirt or the grass or whatever, can really help you kind of come back into your own body and be in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And it really
Absolutely.
is a practice.
Absolutely. And I would say
Yeah.
I fall into that category.
Mm-hmm.
I am very highly sensitive, highly attuned to people's
Yep.
emotions.
Yep. And so it really is a requirement that you have some extended downtime. And for most people, we talk about, like Dr. Erin talks about in her highly sensitive book, it's like the minimum is like 2 hours a night that people need to have
Mm-hmm.
downtime. And it's really easy to get caught up in the screens and answering emails or the phone calls. It's like, nope, having those really good boundaries, like all screen time goes down because the nervous system has to rejuvenate. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
on all the time, taking in all that sensory information, it's like, okay, the brain's still going to process it later on. So got to have some space in between it.
That's
Yeah.
good. I would love to hear what the recommendations are. What do you do? Do they recommend reading, or if you're not
Yes.
doing the screens, or
Yeah, so for a lot of highly sensitives, again, big piece of them, a lot of them are introverts, some of them are extroverts, and it's not right or wrong either which way. It's just kind of knowing what your temperament is with that. But
mm-hmm.
reading, writing, journaling, talking to friends, hanging out outside, playing with your pets, hanging with the people that you're in love with, loved ones, friends,
Right.
stuff like that. So that again, there's some of that rejuvenation, but quiet time for you is also a big thing. So for some people, like they love the bubble baths, and most people are like, I am not a bubble bath person. And that's the only thing. It's like, no, then go take a walk out on those night acres. Go be with those bees,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just watch the
Yes.
hive and what's going on. And you'll start to get in the moment, take your pad of paper and start to journal any of those leftover thoughts from conversations, or what do I need to do tomorrow? It's like, put it down so your brain doesn't keep regurgitating over this stuff when you're sitting
Mm-hmm.
still and it's quiet, right?
Yes. Yes, and
Meditate.
that is a tactic. I do that part. I do the
Beautiful.
part of trying to unload my brain
Yes.
and by
Yep.
writing
Brain
it
dump.
down.
Yep.
Yeah, because I heard that years and years ago, and it's really stuck with me that,
Yeah.
if you wake up and you think, I got to remember to do X,
Yep.
to just write it down, so you give your brain permission to forget it and go back to sleep.
Correct. Yep. And I know for some people that I work with, dance movement is really big. So again, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
doing stretching, yoga, Pilates, the gentle kind of stretches, all of those things can help relieve the stress that you're holding in your body. And it's just knowing, it's like making that routine for yourself. There's the slow startup, as we like to say for a lot of HSPs. So in the morning, making sure you're having your coffee or tea and not having, not like jamming out of bed really quick and hurrying up and getting on your computer and all that stuff to check things. It's like, nope, going to do my morning routine without the electronics so that I can
Mm-hmm.
stay in the calm. And you can do that at different points of the day as well. That all helps
Mm-hmm.
manage that stress.
That's good. And I run too. So you're reminding
Yes.
me, like in
Yep.
the mornings, a lot of mornings I run. And
Beautiful.
that's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Very, like, in fact, when I'm not, like, it does impact me,
Yeah.
emotionally, mentally. I
Yep.
need it more than emotionally, I think, than I do physically.
Yes. Yep. It helps regulate. It truly, truly does. It's amazing what that
Hmm.
exercise can really do. And it's, so many of the women, again, like I work with, they're high achieving, man. They've got big goals and they're going after things, but it's hard not to get caught up into, at least in our country here in the US, of that, hustle all the time. Well, you can't, you literally will burn out. And
Right.
it has that has medical consequences to it. And like you found that out. And so many different people within the book too, they had different things going on. It's like, okay, life is too short. Let me
Right.
reevaluate some things.
Yes. And just for the listeners, the book is full of all kinds of challenges. So some
Yes.
people overworked, some people, were facing severe discrimination.
Yep.
Some had language and cultural issues. Some
Yes.
were immigrants.
Yep.
Some lost children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just see all these things that people, the real life stuff we go through, that
Mm-hmm.
we don't talk about very often in the light of leadership, because
Correct.
all of these people are trying to show up the next day and be the leader that they are, when
And yet they're
something,
human.
yes, they're human, and maybe something really bad is going on
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
Well, and I think that kind of goes back to that vulnerability piece too, right? Of really wanting to shift that in how we do leadership. And I think women do this, can do it extremely well. And I think some men can too, that it's just showing up and it's like checking in, like asking each other, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I support you? Those sort of things. So that when there are bumps in the road, significant challenges, whatever may be going on, you're not alone. Whether
Hmm.
that person can actually physically help you out or whatever, emotionally, like they're there for you as well.
Yes.
And that can
Well,
really
that's
be
one of the
helpful.
things true too I've seen about this network,
Hmm.
because I wasn't. I mean, I've been in other networks, but not with my whole heart like I am with this one.
Yeah.
And with this, it honestly, it gives me strength
Hmm.
knowing they're there,
Yeah.
whether I'm talking to them or not.
Yeah, because I've heard from various women in leadership, it's like as you continue to kind of move up, whether it's your own business or somebody else's business, and you're doing some amazing work, but it's like the further up you get, the more money you make, the more you lead, it often can get really lonely,
Yes,
right? And so
absolutely.
having that network of really incredible women that were there and you were there for them, it does make a big difference.
It does. And it's still, we have a long ways to go
Hmm.
for women's equality. And
Yeah.
so, just knowing that we're sort of all trying to do this together, we're going to push it. We're going
Hmm.
to push through some barriers. We're going to make it easier for the women coming up behind us.
Which I love because, again, it is all about the next generation, right? The women before us who've made some, headway for us, which it's okay. It's like we're going to pay that forward because it also pays it backwards, which changes the next generation. And when we come together, we're much more powerful than trying to do it all on our own.
That is so true. In fact, we did our dedication was to the women who've gone before us. And I was going
Mm-hmm.
to find it here. Here, I said, we dedicate this book to the unnamed and unrecognized women who have gone before us to make a way for the women in this book to be leaders and influencers all across the world.
Yeah. Because as I say,
So we know we're standing on other people's shoulders.
you betcha. And it's women from around the world who've just made some incredible impacts for us to be where we are today. So, yeah,
Yes, we don't want to
beautiful
forget what
dedication.
they've done, because their sacrifices were even harder.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for
I do
sure.
want to say something about that. You mentioned stretching
Mm-hmm.
as a way, and you reminded me, I recently read this book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Mm-hmm.
And David Goggins is this like super athlete, like top US military person.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up, he's an overachiever like many of us.
Uh-huh.
And he started getting sick, and something was wrong with him. They could not figure out what it was. And he had this knot on his neck, but it wasn't anything malignant or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't figure it out. And he's in the hospital for a long time, and finally remembers that like a coach or someone had said something about stretching. So he
Mm-hmm.
starts stretching for like 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it that's what it was. Like there was some like buildup in his body,
Yeah.
and he had to work it out through stretching.
Yep.
So when you said that, I was like, I have totally started to value stretching more than ever. And, I'm trying to implement more and more of that into my life.
Yeah. Well, it keeps the body limber, the lymph nodes moving. I mean, everything just moves through, right? Whether it's energy or
Mm-hmm.
fluids or whatever needs to happen. And when the less we move, the more tight we get and things can freeze up. And
Mm-hmm.
you can get to a place after, as we continue to grow older, right? That's like, oh, you are not going to be able to move that again. And so there's a lot of, importance in keeping limber. And it doesn't mean you have to be able to do the splits or anything like that, but being able to move
No.
all your different body parts. If you want to do the
Well,
splits,
I can
beautiful.
promise you that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
It's been done for me for a while. Yeah.
like if I get wound up, which I do,
Mm-hmm.
like let's say I'm going to give a speech or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll get all wound up about it.
Yep.
And so then my sciatic nerve will tighten up to the point
yes.
where it'll take days to get it unwound.
Yes. So making sure you're stretching and doing gentle things. Again, it doesn't have to be harsh so that you
Right.
stay limber and then the inflammation stays down and your sciatic nerve doesn't go, oh my gosh.
Yes, that's extremely painful.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Bonnie, is there any other kind of story or anything else from what you and Lisa have written that you want to share that I haven't asked?
Well, there's so many stories. I mean, I hope people will read the book, and it's for men and women,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
because
yeah.
for women, I think it's very inspirational to see that, other people are going through some of the same stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised at how much discrimination is still there.
Oh, it's huge. Yep.
It's huge. And so, that I think is helpful for women, but we really want men to read the book too.
Yeah.
And the reason is because every woman in here experienced, and every woman in our network,
Mm-hmm.
all 200 of them, I think, could tell you a discrimination story.
Yep.
And yet, every single one of them have had men who championed them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I want to say to men is you can be either one. Choose.
Correct.
And if you choose to be the women's champion, they will remember.
Yep. And I think sometimes, guys, honestly, for some, not all, just like anything in life with humans, there's sometimes like you don't know what you don't know. And so being able to read these stories and get it from a different perspective and a different space, you're like, oh my gosh, I've done that. Had no idea that's what that was. And so again, it's raising that awareness, continuously being more awake, conscious, and making the changes. Yeah.
Yes. And that unintended bias, like, there are many people who don't have any intention to be biased.
Right.
It's just that they are from their own backgrounds and, everything. And so it, like you said, it is that sort of awakening and awareness, which I talk about that about myself, growing up on a farm in Western Oklahoma in a small farm town.
Yep.
Like I felt like, and still, I was like, I continue to like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like a continuous awakening. And I think we have to give people grace for that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like what you and Lisa are doing with these stories from the women that are also doing everything that they're doing, right? It's that ongoing, the learning, that curiosity you talked about, staying very curious about things. I think that's a key, right? That's how we make changes, is being curious, being open-minded, willing to learn, and knowing it's a never-ending job.
Absolutely. And you look at people like Lisa. So Lisa was on Wall Street. I guess not the current job, but and many of the women in there have been in Wall Street. And when you think back about the movies about what Wall Street's like, you can imagine that, I mean, we've all faced discrimination, but I would say they went through more than most.
Yeah. Very, very incredibly tough for what it used to be. Yeah. And still it is. Yep.
And that is one of the pieces. There's some themes that ran through the book. So resilience is an actual chapter, but it's also probably the biggest theme. Is this ability to take it and sort of mental toughness. Yep. Keep going. And even there's a Nordic word called sisu. And I really kind of wanted to name the book that because it's a deeper level of commitment. It's the 20 warriors who take out the 200. It's like, it's the deep resilience. Yeah. And so choosing to be mentally strong. Yeah. Is a big part of it. That was one. And then another theme that was interesting and caught me off guard was the need to choose the right partner. Yeah. That how important it is that you have someone to support you. And let me just say, there are many women, even in the book, who didn't have that.
Well, and from my clinical experience, because I'm a therapist and I'm also a leadership coach, but in my clinical practice, right, and I've seen it even in my coaching business, that there's often that, oh my gosh, I've been taking care of this person, emotionally, financially, and they're not really the equal. It doesn't mean they're a bad human or anything like that. It's like they've married, maybe it was early on and they weren't where they were, but they had these ambitious goals, and maybe their partners did not. Right. And it's like, definitely outgrown, but then they don't get that support. Like, why do you want to keep doing this? And what's wrong with you? And what about me? And it's like,
and it scares them. Yeah. And it scares the partner who isn't growing, and they will try to hold you back, even if they don't realize they're doing it. Yeah. And so one of the things that we talk about, some of the women who do not and have not had that right partner, is to use, if they're staying, use that as a strength builder, because we talk about, if you go to the gym, what makes you strong is resistance.
Yep.
And so we have to turn it into something we can use, some fuel.
Right.
And so if we're experiencing resistance from our partners and we're not going to leave that situation for numbers of reasons, then we use it as fuel.
Yeah. I love that. It's a beautiful reframe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bonnie, I'm curious, just in this last little bit before we share your website and how they can find you on LinkedIn and everything, who has been somebody who's really inspired you in your life? Who or what that's really been inspirational for you?
Well, I can tell you there. I want to give two. I never can do just one.
That's totally fine.
So first and foremost is my dad. My dad had a 9th grade education, a genius IQ, and somehow knew to tell us that we could do anything.
Oh, beautiful.
And so, there was a lot he didn't know because of the lack of education, but he knew enough to tell us, keep going. You can go further. You can go to the top.
Yep.
And if it weren't for that, I probably couldn't have seen myself out of Western Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so he's a inspiration and a hero. He's passed on, but, in my life. And then the other, I have to tell you, was Lisa and I co-founded the network, but Lisa had a big job and couldn't be the co-president. And so myself and Maria Garcia, who's in the book, we were co-presidents for 2 years. Okay. And she was an undocumented immigrant. She came here at 12. She was undocumented until 18. And but she knew her job, like they came with the American dream, and her job was to get good grades and get into good schools, and she did.
Yep.
And then ended up building a business, selling it to Amazon before any of us knew who Jeff Bezos was.
Oh my gosh.
And then she went on to be the president or CEO of Office Depot for Portugal and Spain.
Wow.
And now she's serving on boards. But the reason she's such an inspiration to me is because I didn't know this story about her until we did the book.
Oh,
I didn't know she was an undocumented immigrant and that she came here with her siblings who they were college educated, but they came here and had to work in our factories in New York so she could go to school.
Yep.
And just the way their family said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And they did. Yeah. And, it's just inspiring.
Yeah. All these obstacles that are definitely in place. And and it's like, we're coming together and then we're going to make this happen. And they did. Yeah.
And they did. And it wasn't easy.
No.
And they came over, she and her siblings came without their parents at first because there wasn't enough for all of them to come.
Yep.
So, sometimes we think, oh, that was really hard. And then I think that was nothing compared to what she went through.
Right. Definitely. All in that perspective for sure. Well, ladies, if you want to find out more about Bonnie, her website is executivedevelopment.com and surveys.edainc.io. And again, I'll have all of this on the show notes. You can also connect with her on Facebook and LinkedIn. Again, those links will be on the show notes. Bonnie, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing about the new book that you and Lisa have created. And I know you both are trying to do the interviews and stuff, and it's the schedules and all that good stuff. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you guys have done, what you're sharing, and how you are helping really let women know there are other women like them around for that support, and for the women, that are coming up the ranks or wanting to do more, there is support that is available and you are seen. So thank you so much for what you do.
Well, thank you for having me here. And I do want to say that, first of all, please consider buying the book. It's on Amazon, also has its own website, thecouragetoadvance.com. Okay. But if anyone has it for their book club, we will put a panel of women together to kick it off for you.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. And there's no charge for that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'll have all that information as well in the show notes too. So cool. Well, all right. Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, I invite you to go out to iTunes and please leave an honest rating and review. In the podcast world, this really helps other women find the podcast and they can see if it resonates with others out there. So I really appreciate all your support and leaving me a rating.